Hey y'all, I'm the Captain, and this is the Captain's Treasure Chest. And this is part 2 in this exciting series where I'm going to explore the contents of this manila envelope. I know, it doesn't sound very exciting. Well, if you saw the first episode of the Captain's Treasure Chest, basically I explained in a previous video before that on my Sailing on the Spectrum series that this is basically all the documentation from my years of when I was young, covering the therapy I got and the evaluations I had while I was being diagnosed, basically while I was on the spectrum. And this was 30 some odd years ago, when it was not understood very well about autism spectrum disorder. And basically it's just kind of just tells the story. And today I'm going to be covering the period of after my 4th and 5th grade years, which I more or less covered in the first part of the Captain's Treasure Chest. And I'm kind of trying to see if I can tie this video together properly. There's something else that came up that kind of, I guess I could bring into this. I'm sure if you know music, you probably heard of the name Sinead O'Connor. She was a pop artist from the 80s and early 90s. And I'll admit, I don't know enough about her, except to know that I do know of her. And actually, a song for which she's most famous is cover of Prince's "Nothing Compares to You." I have heard Prince's a live version by him of the song, so I probably need to go back and replay the other one that Sinead would have done that was a big hit, really put her on the map. But beyond that, Sinead recently came out with a book, an autobiography called Rememberings. I haven't read it, but I kind of am anxious to, because I just read an article where she basically somebody more or less reviews gives the rundown about her, describing her life in her book and the challenges she came through. Of course, another thing for which she's famous is the fact that she took a picture of the Pope and ripped it up on national television on Saturday Night Live. And obviously everybody, that just blew up all over the place, for obvious reasons. But the reasons that were probably not as obvious at the time to people, although they would be, is she was making a big statement about how the excesses of the Catholic Church and how a lot of them were permitting the church was permitting abuse of children. And that's another issue altogether, of course. But at the time, she was just chalked up as a malcontent, who was just dissing the faith, and I guess maybe the whole story is much deeper than that. And she had an upbringing which was abusive herself, apparently, and she was raised in a household that obviously, nominally was of the faith, and so on and so forth. But that's just I read about that, and I'm not here to bash anybody of faith of any kind. It's just that, incidentally, she's converted to Islam. She's certainly exploring that and has chosen to take in that path on her own. But she just has a lot of areas in which she's tried to rediscover herself, and a lot of it seems to be rooted in some of the, oppressive things she's experienced both as a child and then as an adult, and including as a celebrity. But how does that tie into all of this? Well, maybe it doesn't necessarily, but it seemed to kind of invoke some, I won't say sympathetic feelings, but feelings like somehow some of the challenges I came through growing up, and I would be very, very quick to say that I don't know if the challenges I experienced growing up are really quite as severe as the one she had. but the ways in which she's really sought to reinvent herself seem to kind of be, I guess, in some way fueled by her need to just get away from those, feelings of hurt that she experienced in her youth. And you can understand to a large degree why, she is doing that, because she had a lot to overcome, apparently. And I guess the title of her book, Rememberings, is her trying to remember a lot of what she came through, and a lot of, I guess, she says her mind is suppressed, maybe because a lot of it was very traumatic. I know that I came through traumatic experiences, although probably not on the scale that she did. And in many respects, a lot of what happens, and is what is described in here, does bring up some traumas. But it isn't that there are a lot of things that that show you that there are a lot of things that I had that were indeed a lot better than things that would have been in her upbringing. And I can't begin to understand all of it. I would have to read the book and thumb through it. But I thought about how this describes me, a lot of what was being said about me, just purely from a psychoanalytical standpoint. It's basically covering screenings that were done basically after I came through 4th and 5th grade in elementary school, and I was going to be switching schools, starting in a middle school. And it was actually a private Christian school that had its own set of, I guess, expectations and rules and regulations, and its own ethos that I had to overcome on top of what I was already trying to overcome from elementary school, when things were very challenging, and my parents, knowing what I was going through, had to act and try to find ways that I could get help. And part of the ways I got help was going to therapy. And after I was switching schools, I was starting to go to a psychiatrist, and I had to have a screening, and just basically just the rundown of what I was about. It says that I'm on the surface normal. I live with my biological parents. I live with my younger sister. Basically I'm a guy who has fears or phobias, who made me also almost hysterical. I could become argumentative and refuse to accept things without explanation. I have such symptoms as nail biting, nightmares, body rocking, overly sensitive, excessive fears, worrying, and sometimes repetitive behaviors, severe phobias about harsh or loud noises. Even in the 1st grade, he began having difficulties with fire drills. If a fire drill happened unannounced, he would become hysterical at the sound of the bell. It actually wasn't a bell. It was a horrible, it was just terrible. But if you were forewarned about the fire drill, he'd be anxious and unable to sleep for 2 days prior to the fire alarm. He knew it was going to happen. All this stuff is really just descriptive of a kid on the spectrum, but it wasn't understood at the time. And that was just part of the challenge of it, because I came out of it basically with this psychiatrist more or less giving me what it says here, just an over-anxious disorder versus possible early obsessive compulsive disorder. I never was really diagnosed with that, and I never had that, but I think it was just something that they had just as kind of a pre-diagnosis rundown, initial impression diagnosis. And it came out with more or less borderline panic disorder or anxiety disorder. I guess it would be a lot to just go through all of the pages here, but a lot of it covers basically the same wording that I gave. I mean, some of the things that that do jump out at me were the fact that, it talks about the fact that I had good diction. I could actually use words. It says at one point I actually used the word diligently. I guess at about 11 or 12 years old, I guess at the time I was able to do that, but it still was hard for me to actually speak, and it was hard. It does talk about I maintained poor eye contact throughout both the conjoined session as well as the individual session, probably meaning both with my parents there and with just the psychiatrist one-on-one. You know, he describes that he is at times scared and used to cry about the fire drills at school. Sometimes happy, other times sad and scared. It says his current hobbies are to play golf. I did play golf even when I was a kid. Play Nintendo, watch golf on TV, and play basketball at home. I always had those acute interests, you know. His 3 wishes were that people would stop picking on me, number 1. Number 2, that I had another Nintendo game. Number 3, that I was an eccentric millionaire. That's so weird. Maybe I heard that when I saw it on... It's funny, I can remember. I probably saw it on Gilligan's Island when the TV bumpers for the reruns used to say about Gilligan's Island that Mr. Thurston Howell, if you remember the show, was an eccentric millionaire. He was one of the characters on the show. And I don't know, maybe they said he was an eccentric millionaire. I don't know. His intelligence in the interview is estimated at well above average. You know, and that's the thing. You can have above average intelligence and be anxious and on the spectrum. And that's, you know, the thing. It's the quirkiness. And I think maybe I just read this and thinking about Sinead O'Connor is of all the things, because I just read the article about her the other day that I mentioned. She more or less, I don't know, I don't know if anything about anything really relates to me at all directly about Sinead O'Connor, but I just thought about the fact that the amazing and in seemingly outlandish ways she's gone to reinvent herself. I think about that as it relates to some of the certainly less insane traumas that I would have experienced growing up. For a long time, I always wondered how I should invent myself, or if I needed to. It's really taken me well into my adulthood, maybe even up to this day, to really know how to invent myself. But the thing is that in spite of all that I've been through, I'm not going to try to analyze about whether it's because of or in spite of, but just accept that in spite of the worst of things that I've experienced, I've managed to basically come into my own and not feel like I have to invent myself or feel pressured to define myself in ways in order to just avoid people judging me or excessively not accepting me. I still struggle with those things. I still struggle with the self-conscious aspects of my makeup and wondering, you know, do people notice that, or are people going to judge me by that? But I don't know if I do as much, because I should point out that I do have a wife and I have a little girl. I have a very steady job. We are looking at houses, trying to purchase a house. That's a challenge in and of itself these days, but at least we are approved to buy one, and a decent one at that, whenever one comes up in this housing market. But you think about those things and I think, man, the fact that I have that, and that I have people who I'm able to recognize as those who accept me and love me for who I am, and I'm able to recognize and accept them for who they are, that's a lot, not to gloat about, but just to be thankful for. And whatever Sinead O'Connor is up to, and she's up to some interesting things these days. She's really gotten into her own, as it were, starting to anyways, if it could be called that, but in her own way. And I say, well, all the blessings to her, because whatever she is and whatever she's done, like all of us, she needs the ability and really just the blessing to be able to know she's who she is. She is good enough as who she is, because it's hard enough when you come through the challenges of her upbringing, and to some extent maybe the poor religion she was given growing up, or poor version of it, I could say. And then also the feeling that she needed to live up to expectations as a celebrity and as a musician that she needed to overcome. And you could come easily, as I would, I'm sure, come out of that feeling very just tattered and worn and beaten down. And the fact that I have come to be who I am and what I have, and have who I have even today, is something that I don't take for granted. What are you, and what do you think, if you are on the spectrum, or if you have some other disorder that's developmental in nature, or just as a challenge? What do you think you've had to overcome, or still feel like you need to overcome, in order to be able to say that about yourself? And if you have someone you love, what do you think is best that you could do for them, or that needs to be done for them? Do you think it all needs to be professionally sought out? Because it may to some extent, but does it all need to be, or is it just something that's purely, do they just need an arm around them to help them see who they really are, and help them know that they're accepted? It's hard to figure out, and there's no easy answers. And a lot of what's in here is a lot about people coming up with answers for my parents, who, to their credit, wanted to find answers for what could best be done for me. And that was not easy. And a lot of what the people on the other end, the therapists and psychiatrists who assessed me and told them what they needed to say about me, sometimes they didn't always get it. And it's taken a while. It's taken a lifetime, but it's worth it. And I know it would be worth it for Sinead O'Connor. It would be worth it for someone like me, for someone like you, for someone like someone you love. It's interesting, I'm kind of late to the game on these things. Like, it was Autism Awareness Month, and the first day of the month was the Where It Blew, the Dead Blue Day, and I didn't find out until the next day. Well, it was yesterday, I think, Mental Health Action Day. I think just here in the States, maybe it was World Mental Health Action Day. I don't know, I'm not sure which. I need to look at it again. But maybe that's another thing that's been tying into all of this, and maybe something else that maybe the Sinead O'Connor thing came up. I know she's been in and out of mental institutions, I guess, in some capacity in recent years, and I don't know for what reasons. I'm not saying that to judge her. That's just the path she's come through, and she's had a lot to overcome. But whatever I've had to overcome, which probably is nothing compared to her, I'm just thankful I have what I have and who I have. And I'm thankful that I can share it with you. I'm the Captain, and I want you to stay tuned for my next voyage. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe as always. See you next time.